Mars, circa 2055. A young couple prepare to have their first child on the Martian colony. After a long labor, the mother gives birth to a healthy baby boy named Hendrix. Growing up, Hendrix never heard anything negative about Ultor. His mother and father gave their lives to the corporation, in more ways than one. They blamed the plague on bad luck, a Martian virus, bad air, anything but Ultor. When you're in the belly of the beast, you shy away from wondering if it has your best interests in mind. They wanted to keep him out of the mines in the worst way. They pushed him to excel at his studies and glowed with pride at every achievement. As long as he did well in the Ultor schools, he could stay out of the mines. If his grades dropped, he would be down in the tunnels with his parents. It was good motivation. Hendrix took all the tech courses he could. Not just the mechanical classes that Ultor pushed on all of the students to do, but computer science, physics, chemistry, everything they'd let him into. It was a world beyond the gritty, machine oil and red dust place he lived in every day. His studies took him above all that. Ultor had selected him for a technician slot from the time he was 12 years old. They claimed tests showed that he didn't have the aptitudes for more advanced studies. Hendrix never believed that they told the truth about the test results. It was all so easy to him. When they stopped letting him into certain classes, he just borrowed the tapes from someone who was allowed into the classes. He suffered through the mechanical and applied courses during the day, but lived for his nighttime studies. That was when Hendrix first realized that Ultor's rules could be bent, even broken. This opened a whole new world for him. He started looking for ways around their regulations. The deeper he got into his clandestine computer science studies, the more he wanted to start hacking into Ultor's systems. Hendrix knew he had to be careful though. He'd seen what happened to people who got caught breaking the rules. One of his best friends when he was little was Danny Curtis. He was born on Mars, too. When they were 9, his father supposedly stole something from the machine shop where he worked. He got caught and the whole family just disappeared overnight. The supervisor of the apartment complex said that they'd been sent back to Earth. Hendrix was young, but he wasn't stupid. He could tell that his parents didn't believe her either, but they looked at each other and at him and didn't say anything. So, when Hendrix started hacking, he made sure he wouldn't get caught. He broke into unimportant systems, like the lock controls for their apartment. He cracked the code for that after a few nights' effort, and then amused himself for a week messing with it. He'd change the keylock combo just before his parents came home, and monitor the system while they uselessly punched in the key code a few times. Then he would trigger it after they'd given up, and the door would slide open. He started to feel guilty after the first few times he did it, though. His parents were so worn out after 10 hours in the mines that they barely had the energy to open the door, let alone puzzle out why the lock was acting up. Hendrix wormed his way into other systems for the apartment too. Within a few days, he could make the lighting, climate control, and cooking subsystems do anything he wanted. He didn't do it while his parents were around though. There was too much frustration in their lives already. It took Hendrix a long time to get up the courage to crack a system outside of their apartment. He kept picturing Danny and his family. He finally screwed up the nerve and started to hack into the grading records for the complex's school. He figured security would be pretty lax there, all things considered. It took Hendrix about 2 weeks of cautious trial and error, but he finally got in. He made sure he just looked around, didn't mod anything, and got out quick. When no one came knocking at their door over the next few days, he went back in and made some small changes to test scores for a couple of his friends. Hendrix was afraid to do more, as the teachers might notice. That was the start of what made his life on Mars more tolerable. For years he stayed within the boundaries that Ultor set for him. He took all the courses they felt a mid-level technician needed. When Hendrix finished the tech program at age 15, they put him to work in the robot maintenance division, working on bot electronics. For the next 5 years, Hendrix worked long and hard at it, rising from maintenance to science lab support, and then to security technician. All that time, his real work had gone on at home. One of the first subsystems Hendrix looked for was Ultor's tracker programs. By watching them work, he figured out how to avoid detection on his nightly forays. They weren't that smart, so it wasn't hard. Hendrix learned to mask his terminal's network ID and to slip in and out of nodes across the complex. He felt safer then and began to explore farther. He cracked hundreds of Ultor systems, never touching data or code, never leaving a trace, at least he hoped not. Over the years, he'd broken into almost every important system in the mining complex. The exceptions were certain areas within the science lab's computer subnetwork, and the medical facility subnetwork. All files within those areas were surrounded by incredible security and layers of complex encoding. When Hendrix first encountered the science lab section of the network, he took one look at its cocoon and immediately broke contact. It scared him to death. Every 3 months or so after that, he would get up the courage to probe the science lab or medfac subnets again, but was always scared off by the thought of finally getting caught. Hendrix wasn't even sure if he really wanted to see what was inside anyway. He had a bad feeling about it. Those network sections were under the personal security of Dr. Capek, the head of Ultor's science labs. Hendrix used to see him every so often, lurching through the labs, when he worked in the science lab tech support division. He was the scariest person Hendrix had ever met. He looked like he was half robot, with implants all over his body. Most of Hendrix's fear of the science lab subnet centered on running into Capek, even in a virtual arena. Everything Hendrix had discovered during his explorations was in his head. His mother once found notes that he had written and asked him about them. Hendrix convinced her they were for a computer systems class, but it taught him a valuable lesson. Just as he was careful not to leave a trace in the virtual world of Ultor's computer network, he couldn't afford to leave physical evidence in his apartment or workplace. No password lists, notes, or records of any kind. For years, Hendrix existed in two worlds. The physical world that he shared with everyone else in the daily drudgery of the hellish mining complex. But the virtual world of Ultor's computer network was his alone. He never talked about it with anyone, and he never spotted another human presence among the autonomous programs that run the complex. The irony of Hendrix's position didn't escape him. Here he was a security technician, entrusted with observing and maintaining a room full of security monitors and data analysis equipment. He could watch activity in dozens of areas throughout the mining complex. Hendrix could also switch a monitor to show the view through any miner's helmet cam, giving him a choice of thousands of mobile cameras. And yet, he was Ultor's single greatest security risk. With what Hendrix knew about the systems there, he could have brought the entire mining operation crashing down. But he knew that Ultor would find him out for sure then, and he didn't even want to think about that. He could help out anyone who wanted to fight Ultor though, whatever he could do without much risk. Maybe even keep the rebels one step ahead. Hendrix heard that there were some miners who were willing to start a revolt against Ultor. The one making the most noise went by the codename EOS. Her group had been posting flyers urging miners to rise up against Ultor. Hendrix had been watching things slowly fall apart for years, as the miners and Ultor got closer and closer to a final confrontation. That's the way he always dealt with the world, by sitting and watching. Even when his parents died, they both seemed like they'd live and work forever. Then, one day, they had just finished dinner when his father started shivering and twitching, more violently every second. He flopped onto the floor before he or his mother could reach him. His face was bulging and stretching like it was made of rubber. Lumps were moving around under his clothes too. His mother panicked as Hendrix called the medics, but he was dead before they got there. They said it was the plague and had no idea what caused it. Lots of people on his parents' shifts had been hit over the last few years. It always struck suddenly. Sometimes the victim died within minutes and sometimes they were alive when the medics took them away. None of the miners taken away ever came back though. After his mother got over the shock of his father's death, she got mad, really mad. His father had been in for his annual checkup at their section's medical facility just a week before, and she thought they should have found it then. She railed on and on, night after night, about the medics' incompetence and how they could have cured him of the plague. She went in for her annual 4 months later and came back angry all over again. Turns out she gave them a piece of her mind the whole time she was there. 3 weeks after that, Hendrix's supervisor came into the monitoring room, and told him that his mother had collapsed in the tunnels, and died before they could get her to a medvac. After his mother's death, Hendrix got bolder about probing the subnet defenses. He wasn't going to just sit around and watch things happen anymore. He didn't care as much about getting caught. There was nowhere near as much to lose now, and the apartment was so empty with just him there alone. Sometimes, late at night, Hendrix wondered if what happened to his parents was his fault, somehow connected to his journeys into the computer net. In the light of day, it seemed ridiculous, but he couldn't shake the feeling. Maybe something worse was going to happen to him if he didn't stop. When people whispered about escaping Mars and going back to Earth, he could picture it. But Hendrix didn't want to leave, he wanted Ultor to leave. When he told that to his friends, they either laughed or got scared that someone might overhear. Everyone had been brainwashed that Mars was Ultor, and Ultor was Mars. When Hendrix thought about why his father died on the kitchen floor, or why his mother out in the mines, he couldn't imagine Mars without Ultor. He started to believe it was worth dying for.